Welcome to the best of first-person episodes from Phantoms and Monsters. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads.
Followed by the Rakes. I've been seeing this strange creature for the last 4 years, and it seems to follow me. As far as I know, the creature has never tried harming me, but it has oftentimes made me feel unsafe and threatened. As the years have passed, I began paying less mind to it and just putting the feeling in the back of my mind. January 2012, I bought a horse and began boarding it at a very old barn. It was a small tight-knit friendly barn community not far from my home. It had been around since the 60s, surrounded by woods. There were 3 barns, the main arena was entirely surrounded by thick woods, and there were small trails in the woods behind the property. Fast forward to June 2012, I had 2 horses there now. I was there every single day without fail, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. I fed the horses and cared for them. I rode one every night as well, mainly in the arena, but sometimes in the barnyard. There were no field or arena lights, just the moon and stars. One evening, around 5 p.m., I was sitting on her, letting her stand when she started snorting and backing up. I looked up and saw this white or gray creature crawling out of the woods towards us. It had a very small round head, its eyes were just pits. It had a very small mouth, not much detail there. Its arms were very long and thin, fingers also like that. Its ribcage was very pronounced and defined, and its legs were long and lanky. Its movements were very jerky, not smooth and fluid. It slowly jerked out to us when my horse turned and bolted out of the arena. She's a dead broke, calm, well-mannered horse who never spooked before this. Stubborn old mare, but not spooky. She would not go back into the arena that night. I walked her around the barnyard, staying near the main barn, put her up, and ran out to peek into the arena, to find nothing except some footprints where I saw the thing. Throughout the summer, I saw it peeking, almost dancing, around the gate that lead into the woods where the trails were. One night roughly a month later, at about 9 p.m., I was riding that horse again in a front pasture. The moon is full and bright, and I looked to my left to see that creature running full spread by my side on the other side of the fence. I slowed my horse to a stop, and it took off around the corner and behind the side barn into the woods. I continued seeing it, mainly in the woods, but it was always around. Summer 2013, the barn shut down when the owner died. We moved the horses to a friend's place for the time being, and I didn't see it there. Late summer or fall 2013, I found a new barn. Woods directly behind the barn and arena. This place had lights and was much newer. About a month later, when I was getting ready to leave, I heard something in the woods. I looked down the barn aisle into the woods and saw the creature running down the road into the woods. I saw it much less frequently for a while, until later in fall 2014, I began seeing it in the back pasture's woods. It darted in and out of the tree line. I saw a second one sitting in a neighbor's yard. It would sit in the same spot every day and watch me ride. I started taking pictures, which are very poor and crappy, and sent them to a friend who claimed he and some others have seen it. Kept seeing it occasionally, but from a much greater distance than at the first barn. I went with this barn owner to another farm to get some stuff when I saw a very large version of this creature run out from the woods, right behind a tree I was 10 feet from, while I was alone by the trailer. Last November, I house sat for the barn owners. I went out around 2 a.m. to fill water troughs and enjoy the full moon and cool night. I was sitting in the back pasture when 3 of the creatures began coming from the woods. One came up to the trees near the trough where I was, the other 2 were walking along the tree line. The horses were silently munching their hay, pretty far from where the creatures were. I messaged the guy from earlier and told him what was going on. Since that incident, I haven't really seen them. Last summer, I did see one outside my house staring into the windows. A few weeks ago, one was outside my bedroom windows tapping and making a strange vain shrieking sound. This was a lot to type out, but I hope someone reads this and helps me figure this out some more. I'm very open and willing to discuss more paranormal things that have happened with this, my friends' experiences with this, and anything else that could or could not be connected to this thing. KP.
Scary rake or crawler humanoid repeatedly observed in Florida. I am still at a loss for words to explain how scary this is, most all because it is no doubt something not human or any known animal. This is taking place nightly behind a close friend's home not far away and started last fall. The area is in North Florida, near Wakulla, in a very rural area, and behind her house is wild bamboo that has completely overgrown the land surrounding the ruins of an old house that literally collapsed or imploded somewhere approximately 15 years ago. These things have not only taken over back there, but have been seen by several of us, but never in the daylight. This started with a mound appearing that wasn't there prior to last fall that was fairly large size and built entirely of heavy debris from that house and broken bamboo, which alone is scary considering no person can break that in such a way due to the strength. Since it first appeared, this mound has constantly expanded in width and height to an alarming size and has several cave-like openings in it. Now they have dug pretty large-sized tunnels going underneath it. Now I'm concerned as one of them has been seen coming out of the bamboo and underneath her house, under the addition in the back, where her dogs at night will not go alone and act purely terrified, even though still inside the house. We now know that's because these dogs have known this thing, or more than one has been under her kitchen floor nightly for who knows how long. The land around the old house alone has a very strong and bothersome vibe to it alone. Now this. What we have seen is a very thin and pale figure which doesn't appear to have normal legs and very elusive and hostile feeling. Aside from very sinister looking yellow glowing eyes, I haven't seen or has anyone else any other facial features. What do we do? I want to get documentation of this, which I do have pics of this structure they built over time, but none of them, as none of us will dare attempt to even go out our back door at night as the edge of the bamboo and ruins are very close by. UE.
Possible rake encounter, Laredo, Texas. My wife and I were returning from San Antonio, Texas on a Sunday night sometime around May or June. My wife had fallen asleep, and so I turned up the radio and drove south, taking I-35 into Laredo. As we approached the north side of town, I turned the cruise control off and dropped down from 65 to 60 to negotiate the curve under the railroad bridge that crossed the interstate. I was in the right-hand lane as I came close to the bridge. That's when I spotted what at first looked like a homeless guy, completely naked, scuttling along the embankment of the road. He was skinny, pale-skinned, and his arms looked emaciated. As I passed him, I had a creepy feeling that something about this person was all wrong. The way he moved, as well as the way his arms and legs were more animalistic than human. With 26 years in law enforcement, I thought about stopping and going back to see what this guy was doing. However, with my wife along, and it was close to midnight, so I just kept going, figuring the guy was drunk. I told my wife about what I had seen when we arrived at our home. She thought it sounded like some drunken guy living under the bridge. After meeting you folks and hearing about the show you do, I began listening when I have a chance. When you mentioned the rake and described what people were reporting, I looked at the images on the internet that are reported to be of the rake, and sure enough, that is what I saw. The creature was paralleling the road, so I never saw its face or eyes, but the body shape was as close to the drawings as I cared to get. Every time I approach that railroad bridge, I slow down and take a second look, but so far I've only seen it the one time. Chris J.
Rake-Like humanoid encountered in Cheboygan County, Michigan. I lived most of my life, up to the age of 14, in Michigan. We lived in the St. Joseph area, if anyone is familiar with it. Anyway, my grandparents lived in the northern areas of Michigan, and we would regularly drive the 4 to 5+ hour drive and go visit them, either on the way to our lake house, which was a little farther north, or just to see them. They lived in the middle of nowhere, 25 minutes to town sort of thing. Both of their neighbors were a mile in each direction, and their property is huge. They live in a small trailer in the middle of the property. They have 2 pastures to each side of the property, and in the back they had miles of trails that would take you through the woods. My grandfather usually used this for hunting. I was hitting golf balls from the front of the house into the pasture. I hit all my balls and went to go collect them. I opened the gate and shut it behind me, so none of the dogs could get through, and I walked around picking up balls. A couple of them went farther than normal, so I had to walk back behind the pasture area and into the woods. As I was walking I could hear leaves being crushed, but they were like a little off from my steps. I kept hearing this weird noise come from behind me, kind of like a watery sound, I guess. It was like someone just got out of the shower and they were dripping wet. But this noise kept stopping and starting, so I just thought it was the wind blowing water out of the trees. I found my last ball and turned around to start walking back, and I saw something tallish move behind a tree. I could tell it was taller than me, but didn't really know what it was. Being from Michigan, we've got our fair share of scary animals that would love to bite into your meaty flesh, but this was definitely not a wolf and could not have been a bear, so I kind of stood there frozen, just looking at the tree and bushes the thing was near. After a while the thing started to creep out. It crawled out on its hands and legs. First I saw its long skinny arms, which followed by its head. It looked up and around and finally looked at me. It crawled the rest of the way out, and I could see the thing whole. It had skinny arms like it hadn't eaten in a while. Dark looking skin that had a shine to it like it was slimy. Its body was just like a mass of flesh. It didn't look to have a stomach or chest, it was just kinda twisted up and misformed. Its legs were just as long and cut up looking as its arms, and both the thing's feet and hands were elongated. Not massively or anything, but you could tell it was longer than your average foot hand. Its head was the part I have a really hard time pinpointing down. It had eyes. No hair and a long mouth that wouldn't open. The nose was just two holes, and it had a very long exaggerated chin, but it kind of looked normal in a way. It stared at me, and without opening its mouth, it made the sounds I had been hearing, which seemed to be made by its nose as the holes flared. It started to walk around. Not at me, but just around where it was. Then it stood up on two legs. It was probably on about 6.5 feet tall, but its look and appearance made it look a lot scarier. The thing moved its neck in an unnatural way, and then it looked at me. It was only about 25 yards away. Way too close for comfort, but I was not about to move and have this creature charge me. All of a sudden it just bolts right at me. I opened my eyes wide and just prepared myself, but it ran right by me and through the woods. I turned around and sure enough it just kept running. Sometimes on all fours, sometimes on two legs. Its run both ways was unnatural. Its body contorted and just looked so off. I ran out of the pasture and shut the gate behind me again. I didn't tell my grandparents right away, but a couple months later I did. This was in the summer of 2018. I didn't tell them until about fall of the same year. My grandfather pulled me aside after I told him and asked me what it looked like exactly. I told him and he said he'd seen it before out on the trails. He didn't say any more, just for me not to be worried. I haven't really told anyone but family and close friends about this, but I guess that has changed now. This really messed me up for a while. Scary thing is too, I've seen it after. Several times. In different places. Never at my home, but anywhere up north. Even at a lake cabin an hour away from my grandparents. This one was by far the scariest though. I don't know, but does anyone have any possible thing it could be? Please help me figure this out. This took place about 2 years ago in Cheboygan County, Michigan. GG.
This is Lon Strickler. If you like this program, it would help us if you would give it a thumbs up. Then subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notification when we upload new first-person encounters. We have many more to come very soon. And by the way, if you have a suggestion or an experience of your own, please leave a comment.